Mitel's Freedom Architecture was launched back in November 2010, and effectively what it does is it provides us with a framework in which we can describe the way in which we add value to the customer's business. We break it down into 4 key elements. So just going through these one by one. First of all, a single cloud-ready software stream. So what we mean by that is that you can take Mitel Communications Director, that's our core control software, and implement it either on Mitel's proprietary hardware, that's called the Mitel 3300 Integrated Communications Platform, or an industry standard server, or you can move into a virtualized environment, most notably with VMware. And you can move between those environments without making a major investment in software, in new licenses and devices. And that's really important at this time, because if you're concerned about architectures and clouds and hosting and all of those kinds of things, to an extent it takes away that pain, because if you invest in a solution of this kind, then you can transition between those models as your business evolves and as it makes sense for your organisation. The second one has to do with an in-office experience anywhere, fairly straightforward point, I think. From an end user's point of view, I think it's really important that you're able to offer them a consistent user interface, whether they choose to work in the office, at home, whether they're mobile, or indeed they're working at some other location like a supplier's office or a hotel room. From a management perspective, it's very important that you can control the communication costs and the kinds of services that are delivered to those end users. Freedom from walled garden architecture. So I guess Mitel's a little bit different from some of our competitors in that unified communications and voice is pretty much what we do. We're not highly reliant on selling tin or other software applications in order to keep the lights on. And so it's really important to us that we're able to embrace other people's solutions, work with other data networks, work with any kind of networking, work with any kind of device. And I think that's really important from your point of view as users. Not only if you like, at the point of implementation where you're trying to build a best-in-class solution to meet your current requirements, but also because going forwards we're never quite sure how, for instance, the mobile world is going to evolve over the next 3 to 5 years, who the winners and losers will be. So it allows you to make on-the-fly technology decisions as you, and if you like, tune your strategy going forwards. And then finally, this freedom from commercial offerings. So I'll talk a lot about the options from a Mitel perspective, but I think it's really important that you work with a partner like Britannic who can take an independent view of the options that apply to your business. And sometimes, you know, creating these commercial offerings. So am I going to buy it? Am I going to lease it? Am I going to deploy it on a site-by-site basis? Am I going to deploy it as a private cloud? Or am I going to go software as a service? Sometimes the commercial offerings, in terms of stringing those together, can be as complex and difficult to develop as the technology components. Taking a slightly different view of it, one IP network, most probably connected to the public network by SIP trunks for all the reasons that Jonathan talked about earlier on. If you're considering any kind of centralization, then SIP trunks are really important because it allows you to map geographic numbers to a non-geographic location. So keeping your local numbers, that would apply, particularly if you were a hotel chain or a retail organisation or something like that. And then of course we've got a range of devices, some of them fixed, some of them wireless, some of them mobile. Some of the boundaries blurring, so for instance for our desk phones, we do a cordless handset device. We've been shipping a decked cordless handset device for about 2 years now. It's got a range of about 100 to 200 metres in free space, provides you with a level of personal mobility. I, as of about 3 weeks ago, gained an alternative version to that, which is a Bluetooth handset. And the motivation for us doing that is that whilst it has less range, it gives you the benefit of being able to go and buy any Bluetooth connected device and pair it with the Mitel phone on your desk. Another technology we're looking at the moment is that of private mobile networks. So building, as an alternative to say decked or Wi-Fi within a building a personal mobile network. And who knows, it might be that for certain kinds of offices you make a decision to implement a private mobile network, but not implement any fixed telephones on the desk, but just let people use their mobile phones connected to your own network in that building. There is, of course, a slow but very deliberate trend towards people working in different ways and using mobile devices, so we've been apt to ignore that. Latest figures from Gartner are that this is Q1 2011 worldwide, 428 million mobile devices sold. That represents a 19% increase year on year. Of those, about 24% were smartphones, and that represents an 85% increase year on year. And then within that smartphone market, some big winners and losers. So for instance, Android are up from I think 9% to 36% of that market. And Windows as an operating system down from 7% to about 3.5%. So bear in mind, having said that, bear in mind, in a market that's growing by 85%, that's roughly a flat product shipment, but interesting to see how that's going out. Of course, the figures for next year could well be very different because Microsoft have this partnership now with Nokia, who are the biggest, still the biggest biggest proportion of the mobile network about mobile devices, represents over 25% of the shipments. And then there's the communications suite, if you like, software-based, so potentially no hardware involved in this at all. Just want to leave you for a moment with the thought that it's really important to be able to mobilise these applications. We'll come back to that as we start to do some of the virtualisation slides. And then I guess one last view of all of this, which is an end user view. So I just want to take you through an example of a fairly demanding mobile worker, and actually see very close to the way that I work, although I'm certainly not as demanding as Michelle is here. I'm kind of in the office 60-70% of the time, I guess. Michelle here is out of the office probably 95% of the time. So to take a day in the life of Michelle, she has a sales meeting in the corporate office first thing in the morning. Because that meeting was scheduled in her diary, it has controlled her dynamic status. So her dynamic status has changed to in a meeting, and that in turn has changed her call routing. Okay. So while she's in that meeting, she has deemed that all her calls will go to voicemail. Now as it happens, she gets lucky. The sales meeting finishes early. She walks out into the car park, gets into the car, and because her mobile device, in this case a BlackBerry, has associated itself with the Bluetooth kit in a car, it automatically causes her dynamic status to change from in a meeting to in the car, which in turn changes the call routing. So now all the calls are being directed to her mobile phone. Through Mitel Unified Communication Box, she can see what voicemails were left for her while she was in that meeting. She can select the ones that are important and return those calls. So she checks her voicemail messages and she sees that she has a has a message left from a client. She decides who she wants to respond to that immediately. It's clients who want to change to the contract. So through 4-digit dialing, she can make a call into the office. She can talk to the contracts manager and start to deal with that call. When she arrives home, a couple of things happen. First of all, because she's within a predefined distance of her home, perhaps 20 metres, the GPS in her mobile device detects that occurrence, and then she moves, and then again changes her her dynamic status to at home. So then all the calls are directed to home. As she walks in through the door, if she's got that call in progress to the contracts manager, she can, in one button press, move that call onto her phone at home, and then escalate that call into a collaboration call in order that they can both see and share the contract, make the changes, get that piece of work done, and get that sent back to the client. And then, of course, at the end of the day, again, potentially through her calendar entry, which defines the length of the day, she can make a decision about when the day ends and whether what's going to happen to those calls during that downtime. So for me, the value in that is that I hardly ever change my dynamic status manually, so I never forget to do it. In my case, I've got 2 locations marked. One is my home, one is my office. If I'm not at home or in the office, then effectively I'm mobile, so to my mobile device. The technology underlying that, just want to show you two pieces. The first one is a change that we made to the way our call control works about 2 or 3 years ago. So instead of directing the call to a specific device, we direct it to what's called a personal ring. In that personal ring group, you can have up to 8 devices. They can be any device you like, so long as they've got a directory number of some kind. Each of those devices can be marked absent or present, and when a call comes in to that personal ring group, all of the devices that are present will ring. If it's a device that's effectively off PBX, so it's a mobile phone, perhaps your phone at home, then through some feature access codes, you've got PBX type features, so you can transfer calls from your mobile phone back into the office, or initiate a conference, those kinds of things. Some very simple ways of controlling that presence and absence. On a Mitel phone, you can simply program a key, press it once, the phone that it represents will go present, press it again, it will go absent, the light goes off. Or alternatively, you can emulate that behaviour on any other mobile phone by bringing back that feature access key under a speaker. So that can be done without any applications overlay at all. So a very simple way of managing calls and creating a one-number identity for where people can. Overlaid onto that is the UC piece. So traditionally, you would see it deployed on a knowledge worker's desk, and it would do things like presence, availability, secure instant messaging, maybe some point-to-point video conferencing and that kind of thing. My personal view is that whilst that is of value for particular work groups, the real value of it comes when you're able to deploy it across the whole organisation. So for example, in a contact centre environment, you can use it to identify specific skill groups in the back office. So imagine now your agents are skilled up to manage perhaps 85 or 90% of the calls that come into the contact centre. That 10th call requires some kind of back office expert, maybe a product manager or something like that. What you can do is build skill groups, product managers that know about particular products, can speak particular languages, or whatever it is that you need to do. Quickly look down that group of people with that expertise, see the availability of those people, make a good decision about who to contact for the answer. And it might, of course, be as simple as a quick instant messaging into the back office to get the answer whilst chatting to the customer. so the customer doesn't really know. And then finally, of course, there is the way that it appears on a mobile device, because those are the people that are most, if you like, remote or disconnected from your business. So in a way, it's those people that will get the most value out of being able to see presence, availability, do corporate telephone, directory lookups, visual voicemail, because it's like it glues your organisation together and makes it work more efficiently. Just continuing with the BlackBerry theme for a moment, there are two separate solutions in our portfolio for BlackBerry. So the first one is Mitel Unified Communicator Advanced. That's the application you see here. So you can see there current status is in the office, and the user has got various options to change their dynamic status with their call history and corporate contacts. One very useful feature which just sits off the screen here is something called an office link, place an office link call. So what you can do is you can select that option, and it effectively causes the office system your enterprise voice system to set up the call for you, and therefore doesn't charge that call to the mobile phone. So that's a very useful facility if you're starting to get into bring your own device, because it allows people to make a call on behalf of the business but charge it to the office system. So that's that piece. The second piece is a piece of work, a very specific piece of work we've done with RIM to support MVS, mobile voice server. And in this scenario, it's effectively a piece of RIM software called MVS that sits alongside the BlackBerry Enterprise server to effectively integrate your BlackBerry environment with your enterprise voice system. So what you see as an end user is two lines on your phone. So you can either make a regular GSM call, or you can make an on-PBX call. If you make an on-PBX call, what that means when you're out and about is that MVS originates that call. What it means if you're in building is that you're able to use Wi-Fi, and it effectively becomes a SIP extension of the PBX. And of course you can extend that principle out to, if you've got home workers, where you've got a VPN out to the home workers' home office, then they would not need a teleworker set. They could potentially use their BlackBerry connected to their home Wi-Fi across the internet, or VPN into the office. A couple of months ago we introduced UCA for Android, and also we're just in trial now with UCA for iPhone. And I should also say that the applications have also been verified on things like the new BlackBerry Playbook and also on iPad. So that's what to do if you've got any of those devices. There is an extra option, which is to deliver UCA as a web service, which effectively means you can plant it on any smartphone without there being a client. So the benefit of the client, of course, so in the case of a BlackBerry, you download the application from BlackBerry App World, and it's a self-provisioning application. So you set it up to work in the way that you want to use it as an end user, and all of those dynamic statuses, you name them, whatever you want to name them. You have as many as you like, and you put whatever call routing you wish of those services. Okay, moving on to virtualization. These are Gartner's top 10 strategic technologies. Every year they go out and ask significant enterprise IT directors what's on their mind. Unsurprisingly, virtualization is the top strategic technology at the moment, for all of the reasons that Jonathan outlined earlier on, to do with doing more with less, to an extent to do with huge rises in energy costs, and also companies striving to simplify support and processes, all those kinds of things, and also look at this self-provisioning piece. So I think it's useful just to spend a bit of time looking at the range of options and some of the logic, because out at various events I hear everything from customers who are saying, in 3 years' time we don't want any servers on site. Anybody got that opinion here? Okay. And people right up at this end of the spectrum where they're saying, no, we like our systems to be discrete, particularly in the voice arena, because we consider it to be a specialist subject and we want it to be separate. So I think something else you often hear is, well, this private cloud thing, isn't that just centralisation? And this public cloud thing, isn't that just hosted? And I think there's some truth in that, but it's useful just for a moment to consider what the difference might be. And I think the biggest difference is the self-provisioning piece. So I think if you haven't done this self-provisioning piece, you've probably just done centralised and hosted in honesty. So I think the panacea is to get to a point, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, where you can, where an end user can pretty much go online, configure their own application pieces. And I think in terms of adoption, there, almost every view will be applied. So I think we'll see an increasing diversity of solutions. And I think it's likely that commodity applications will probably go to the cloud first. So you heard Jonathan earlier on talking about what they've done in Britannic, and they picked on email first to move into the cloud. And then at the other end of the scale, of course, you've got very specialist applications. So for instance, in a manufacturing environment, you might say, well, I'm never ever going to outsource those very specialist control systems that control the manufacturing plant and the way it makes. So it's all about reducing complexity. How many of you have got comms rooms like this at the moment, computer rooms? We certainly had one a few years ago. And the problem here, of course, is that for every server you have, it pulls through more rack space, it pulls through more cables, it pulls through more data ports, and then in turn it pulls through more heating, ventilation, and all of those kinds of things. So if we can simplify, it makes a huge difference to the outcome, the cost of supporting the environment. Traditionally, you couldn't virtualize voice. So I think it's probably useful just quickly to outline some of the things that have contributed along the way to achieving, to getting to the place we are now. So I think the first big step occurred 10 to 12 years ago when we started to see the first deployments of IP telephony. And the importance of that is that in a pure IP telephony solution, the call control element, the PBX if you like, no longer takes a part in switching the voice. So in a pure IP solution, all of the voice packets go directly between one desktop and another. So the call control is only there to provide the intelligence. The second important piece was the launch of the Halo chipset, that's the Intel 55000 series. And that's important because it processes in a different way. And depending on how you overlay the applications onto that, it processes it enables you to work much faster. And then the third piece, which we were lucky enough to be involved in, was the introduction of VMware's vSphere 4 product. So as they were developing that, we were lucky enough to get some of our R&D engineers involved in that work. From VMware's point of view, they were interested to know about some of the requirements that we had from a real-time voice point of view, and from Mitel's perspective, it was hugely important in developing our software components to fit into that environment. So as of about 15 months ago, you can virtualize, in a VMware environment, you can virtualize Mitel call control, and most, if not all, of the significant applications. there are there are effectively three key benefits that come out of virtualization. So the one that everybody talks about is this consolidation piece. So that's very simple. Take 7 servers all running at 10% utilization, put those 7 applications onto one PC, and run that PC at 70% utilization, therefore dramatically reducing the amount of hardware you have. Second benefit, it has to do with isolation, because often when you start to mix up applications on the same server, they don't always play nicely together, particularly in the area of the way that they use storage. And the third one, and this one is absolutely key as we go through the slides, is this encapsulation piece. Because by encapsulating the application and make it mobile, so you can start to do some really clever things with that application. There are, just to make you aware, 2 ways of doing virtualization. So there is a hosted approach, where the virtualization layer sits above the operating system. That tends to be more economical. Often used as an approach on the desktop, a very valid approach on the desktop. But for a server virtualization, where speed is key, then it is absolutely crucial you take this bare metal approach, which is the approach that VMware take with vSphere 4. So what we're saying there is effectively you take a server and you load vSphere 4 on it directly onto the server. We chose VMware. If we're honest, because they were keen to work with us. They've got, it says 72% there. I think they've got something like, I think the latest number I heard was 85% of applications that are virtualized are sitting within a VMware environment. They've got over 250,000 customers. They've got something like 4,500 channel partners worldwide, and they've got something like 1,300 technology partners, which might be the one. But they're also really pushing at some of the leading edge in terms of creating an environment in which we can virtualize a real-time application, and also doing some really interesting things now with desktop virtualization. So we're currently working with them to create the ability to do a single sign-on in a VMware Review environment, where you sign on to both the computing environment and also the phone on your desk becomes your phone with your characteristics. So it's just really linking hot desking, if you like, to VMware Review. So where are we today? We deliver all of our significant applications as a virtual appliance. I think it's really important to understand the significance of virtual appliance, because what it means is it simplifies the installation, because you load the application directly into the vSphere 4 environment, and it achieves much better integration with the VMware features. So a bit of an eye test, but this is our current compatibility chart. Mostly ticks, as you can see, for things like high availability, site recovery manager. The one exception is this fault tolerance piece. So this is where you run 2 applications or 2 identical occurrences of an application in a VMware environment. They run absolutely not sync. So if one occurrence for some reason goes down, the other one takes over more or less seamlessly. So at the moment you can only do that if you run in one virtual CPU, and most of our applications run in at least 2 in place of the core control version 4. So I know VMware are working on that, so as soon as they have a solution for that, then we'll try and work with it. There are 2 ways you can implement or use, I think, within a communications environment. There are 2-way approaches you might take to virtualization. So the first, and perhaps the simple one, is to create what I call a package solution. So imagine 2 examples here. You want to create a mobile working server, which you could add to perhaps your legacy telephony environment as the first step towards migration. So you could take Mitel Communications Director, Unified Communicator Advanced, BlackBerry Enterprise Server, and Mobile Voice Server, because both of those applications can live within a virtualized environment, and effectively create one server that provides you with all of the things we talked about earlier on. Or you could do it on a vertical market basis. So imagine you were a retail organisation, or you were a hotel group. You might, in order to reduce complexity in the store or in the hotel, you might take a server, load VMware onto it, and create, if you like, a package solution which is dedicated to that particular application. The other approach, and the more commonly executed one within an enterprise business, is to create a VMware cluster. It's very likely that you'll start with regular business applications. So it's probable that you'll be 30 to 50% through the process of virtualization before you start to consider virtualizing the voice elements. And it's the usual reason, looking to do more with less. So we see a lot of public sector organisations, particularly healthcare and education now, looking very seriously at virtualisation as a way of doing more with less. Organisations that are looking to improve business continuity. So of course financial services might be good use of VMware. And also, as you'll hear a little bit later on, any organisations that are concerned about green IT or sustainability. So, taking those in turn, first of all, reducing cost. So, taking as a baseline a legacy PBX user, there are a number of reasons why you might migrate into a Mitel IP telephony environment, to do with eliminating cabling infrastructures to reduce boot outs and changes. Within a Mitel environment, if you have more than one instance of MCD, you can link them together with something called Synchronous Data Service, SDS, which allows all of the customer data entry to be shared across a number of nodes. There are all the pieces that Jonathan talked about earlier on to do with calls over a private network, to do with saving money through implementing SIP trucks, and through integrating your mobile devices. And then, if you add the VMware benefits, significant benefits in terms of reduction in complexity and also in support efficiencies. So these two graphs I'm about to show you now, these are VMware graphs based on their current users. So they're saying that typically a user will gain 60% cost reduction, if you like, in infrastructure per application. And also they'll gain a 2 to 3 times gain in productivity based on their IT support staff. I think this one's a bit conservative, and I think this one is probably a bit optimistic. But it's somewhere in that order. The next one has to do with business continuity. So we all know that people are less likely to build DR sites these days. They're expensive, they're difficult to maintain, and they don't cover off all eventualities. So we have lots of conversations with customers about the way that they can use hot desking as a way of bringing users to another office, the way in which they can use mobile working to enable people to work at home, and the way in which they can use dynamic extension to build in mobile devices. So that all makes your organisation more flexible, more resilient to certain kinds of threat. So a good example would be a pandemic where we probably would want people to work at home, for example. And also, of course, these kinds of solutions have some really strong day-to-day benefits and also cover off some other kinds of challenges where you've got perhaps a transport strike or a day of snow or whatever. And then you can have those VMware benefits. And we'll go through these in a moment, but what it potentially means is that you can have one business continuity plan that covers off all of your business applications and your voice solutions. Today, most people will have two business continuity plans, or at least two parts of that, of one business continuity plan. So high availability, that's simply the ability, if a piece of hardware fails, takes the application with it, it will automatically establish that application on an alternative piece of hardware, bring it back up, so within a reasonable time period, perhaps 30 minutes, that application is back up and working again. Now the way that would work in a Mitel environment, if you had a resilient solution, is the primary occurrence would fail, secondary occurrence would take over seamlessly, and within a defined period of time, the primary occurrence would be back up again, and therefore we'd be back into a resilient scenario without having to take any specific action. On a grander scale, there is Site Recovery Manager. So what Site Recovery Manager does is it kind of automates your disaster recovery plan or your business continuity plan. So imagine now you've got a documented process, lots and lots of steps in it about how you migrate all of your applications from one data center to another if the worst happened. What this does is automate that process, so you can reserve resource on a second data center. You can prioritize all the applications and the order in which they're moved across. And the great thing about this is that it forces you to, if you like, update the process, because every time you change an application or add an application, it forces you into a process of considering where it fits into this site recovery plan. Whereas if you've got a written process, it's probably good for about 3 or 4 hours after you've run the process. Right, sustainability. So back in 2008, a little while ago now, an independent organisation in the US did an assessment of the various voice solutions and the amount of power they use. As you can see, Mitel came out quite favourably. We're a Canadian company, and therefore we do our best to hug trees and use as little power as possible. So thinking about that as a baseline, just for a moment, if you add the VMware pieces, big gains from this server consolidation piece, but also some really clever features within VMware that help you to manage power. So there's a feature in VMware called distributed resource scheduling. So imagine for a moment, for some reason this application here becomes very busy, starts to load this piece of hardware up beyond a threshold that you've decided. Then what it can do is automatically move that application across onto another server to balance that workload. Now similarly, you can use distributed power management so that if, say, on a Saturday, Sunday and Monday, the load across this VMware, this cluster is very light, it will move all the applications onto one piece of hardware to save power. And then as they become busier and they need more processing power, it will distribute across a wider range of resources. And this is important because, I love this slide, 100 units of coal going into the power station, 63 of them get lost in the network, you lose another 14 in the heating, lighting and ventilation, and then if you have a server utilisation of 7–10%, then only 1% of the energy that is fed into the process is actually used for processing. So any gains you can make here have a huge effect on the lumps of coal that go into the front of the process. Business agility. So in these trying times, lots of businesses have issues where their IT budgets have been cut, and they find themselves in a position where they're using perhaps 70 or 80% of their resources just to keep the lights on. So a lot of money going into support contracts, to the IT help desk, to support users, and it becomes harder and harder to support business processes and to take a proactive role in saving the business money, making it more efficient, improving customer interaction, those kinds of things. So by adopting VMware or virtualization as an approach, and then folding all of your business applications into that environment, you are therefore reducing the amount of effort that is being expended on keeping the lights on, and therefore you can spend more time getting involved with all the departments within your organisation, thinking about the way they work, thinking about the way that IT can bring right to those business challenges. Finally, back to this investment protection piece. So, for those of you who are Mitel customers, you will know that we've had an investment protection strategy, if you like, which dates back into the mid-80s, at the beginning with the start of the black box SX2000s. In the 90s, you might have moved through to an SX2000 light. As we move through into the 2000s, you might have moved to a 3300 architecture. And at each point, retaining a reasonable proportion of your infrastructure and protecting your investment. So this really extends that investment protection program. So what we say is that you can take your Mitel SX2000 legacy environment, you can, if you wish, plug into that a Mitel 3300, and then you've got various technology decisions going forward based on industry standard servers and based on virtualization. So you've got freedom from a device perspective, we saw that earlier on. You've got freedom from a data networking perspective because we'll work with any data network. You've got freedom from a trunking perspective because we can do analog to digital, we can do zip. And you've got freedom from a platform perspective, as we see there. Our lead customer in the UK was Ashford Council. Rob had virtualised just about everything he could, except for his voice. So he made an excellent lead customer for us in the UK. He moved his voice across into his VMware environment in February 2010. So he's been running that for 18 months now. And as you can see there, he's claiming some pretty spectacular results in terms of reducing the number of servers, saving energy, and also reducing all his support costs. Just quickly, I want to go through where some of the other vendors are at, because you will find that all of the vendors will claim that they do virtualization, and they do to an extent. So very quickly, in Avaya's case, they're kind of hardware centric. They use HP servers, but you have to buy them from Avaya. They're white branded Avaya. And I think the model numbers are, any Avaya experts in the room? 8150 and 8830, I think, are the two platform things. But they do it in a Citrix Zen server environment, so that's quite popular for thin client desktop virtualization. Less popular as a platform for server virtualization. And I think significantly, you cannot run any other third-party applications alongside that environment. So you can't just take the voice components and plug them into your VMware cluster in the way that you do the Mitel solution. Cisco, they use their unified computing system platform. They use VMware, but again, not co-resident with other third-party applications, so you can't get a lot of the benefits that we've talked about, and that's where they say that. Microsoft, unsurprisingly, can virtualize in Hyper-V and VMware, and with some fairly significant engineering will let you run third-party applications. However, they've got very poor integration into all of the VMware and Hyper-V features. So some of those pieces around high availability and power management and sign recovery management are not available. Also, if you start to run up to a significant number of users, the solution becomes extremely complex in terms of the way that you have to, in the way that you implement it, and some of the professional services that run around it. ShoreTel, Again, they do it with VMware. It's not a virtual appliance, it's a physical to virtual installation process, so more complex. Also, they have to put a network interface card into the server, which eliminates all of the mobility pieces, the remotion pieces that we talked about. So in terms of gaining business value, you probably wouldn't gain a whole load of business